Let's get ready to mortgage. He is the prince of programs, guru of guidelines, master of matrices. He puts the fun in funding. Please welcome Mark, Mr. Mortgage Eitel.
All right. My name is Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show, and Dom, my producer, and I do this little mortgage mashup every week right here. Same bat time, same bat channel. So we are super excited that you're joining us. And hey, we've got an awesome show lined up for you this week. I know real estate is top of mind with a lot of people. We're getting a ton of questions during the week about, what's going to happen. Interest rates are rising. Housing prices are increasing. Inflation is here. We're entering a recession. Oh my God, the sky is falling. What is going to happen? So we're going to dig into all of that. We've had a lot of really, really good questions this week. So I've made a note of all of that. And our goal, as always, is that you walk away from this 50 minutes with us more educated and informed so you can make better decisions about mortgage and real estate for you and your family. So thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, we're going to cover a lot of those topics, and we're going to get to your questions too. As always, you can text or email or I almost said fax your questions. Shows you how old I am if I'm expecting you to fax your questions in. But yeah, you can either call or text them into the Anytime hotline, which is 561-291-8569, and we'll get to them during the show, or visit the website, www.mr.mortgage, and you can submit your questions there too. So as I mentioned, there's a lot going on in real estate this week. So we're going to arm you with the necessary information so you can kind of move forward and find the best opportunities out there for you and your family. But we're going to jump right in. I know things are crazy out there. I mean, it seems like overnight interest rates jumped from the 3s to the 5s. And I know it's got a lot of people unsettled. If you're a listener of the show or you follow the Mr. Mortgage Show on Facebook, this isn't a surprise. You've known that it was coming. I think the big surprise is how quickly it happened. We were anticipating rate increases going all the way back to the end of 2021. We anticipated at the beginning of Q4 in 2021, we'd start to see some incremental rate increases to offset the inflation. But remember, back then the Fed said, oh, don't worry, this is transitory. And I actually had to look up transitory because that's not a word I had heard recently outside of, women's swimming in college. But I just found it interesting that they were surprised that this really stuck. And I think because of that, they waited to start to make moves in the market as far as raising interest rates and then bleeding off the balance sheet, which is really having the big impact on mortgage rates. So I kind of feel like, remember that movie, Driving Miss Daisy? At least in that movie, Miss Daisy was in the backseat. I kind of feel like Jerome Powell is Miss Daisy and he's driving the car, which is making us a little nervous because they've waited so long to correct. There is the danger of them overcorrecting, but we're going to dig into that, what effect all that is having on the market, both short term, and then give you some great insight as to how to use what's going on short term to plan for some long term strategic moves in real estate. So, inflation 8.5% was announced this week, year over year, which I think it's probably more like 10. To be honest with you, I was surprised it was only 8.5. But nevertheless, scorching inflation. We haven't experienced this since 1981, which has some people concerned because in that time period back in the 80s, we saw inflation and interest rates really jump. And we'll talk about the correlation between interest rates, appreciation, and inflation as we go deeper into the show. But that was big news this week, 8.5% inflation year over year. And it got me thinking about 1981 because that's the last time that we've had inflation moving this quickly was 1981. And usually I'll do some type of music analogy, but I honestly was kind of disappointed with the music of 1981 when I did the research. So I looked at the movies of 1981, and I've got my list here somewhere. I'm a little embarrassed it's not right on top, but 1981, Porky's came out. I don't know if you guys remember that teenage comedy. Probably shouldn't talk much about that, but Porky's came out in 1981. Chariots of Fire came out in 1981, probably one of the most iconic music scores of all time. And I don't have my list. Darn it, I thought I had it here with my show prep. But also Two Stripes. And that was one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Bill Murray. And I'm going to have to do this from memory because I was looking for the list because I printed this out. And there was a quote in Stripes where he was trying to get everybody to prepare for the gun presentation that they were going to do at graduation so that they could move out of basic training. And I'm doing this from memory, so bear with me. But he said something to the effect that he was getting them all excited and committed to this training. We're Americans, right? And he said, you know what that means? That means our forefathers were kicked out of every decent country in the world. We're the wretched refuse, if I remember correctly. We're mutts. So I take from that comedy, that little spiel, that Americans get it done. We may not be the first choice. Our forefathers got kicked out of every decent country in the world. We may not be your first choice, but we can usually buckle down and bootstrap it up and get it done. And we can cry about the interest rates, we can cry about inflation, or we can just suck it up and find the opportunity in this market. And the good news is, as we go through the show, you'll find that there is opportunity in this market. There always is. Housing typically does very well in cycles of inflation and in a recession. So I pulled a chart I'll share with you real quick, kind of a sneak peek about what we're going to get into. But in the 70s, housing appreciated for the entire decade at 9.9%, while inflation was 7.1%. In the 80s, they were more closely paired, with inflation at 5.6 and housing at 5.5. In the 90s, housing actually exceeded appreciation inflation once again. Inflation rate of 3%, housing appreciation at 4%. And then in the 2000s, which the end of that decade started the recessionary period of the housing bubble burst, which may skew these numbers, but inflation at 2.6% and housing appreciation at 2.3%. And then in the 2010s, inflation outpaced appreciation as the bubble burst and we were recovering. Housing only moved at 1.8%, while appreciation was almost 5%. And then since then, housing appreciation has scorched inflation. I mean, in the 2020 decade, it was 9.2 for housing appreciation with only a 1.4% inflationary rate. And then 2021, it's not even fair because COVID and the cheap money really buoyed housing. But housing at 18% average with inflation at 6.8%. So my point in that is, while Chicken Little is out there running up and down the street telling us that the sky is falling and, consumers are scared. You don't know whether it's a good time to buy, it's a good time to sell. Should I refi, pay everything off and just hunker down because the end of the world's coming? Or, should I light myself on fire and run naked down the street? There's a lot of people who just don't know the answer to that question. So the good news is historically housing does very well against inflation and more importantly against a recession, as I think just about everybody has agreed that we're moving into a recessionary cycle. I personally believe we're already there. I think we're in the beginning of a recession, but typically they don't call it until, we're into it for a year or so. That's another thing I find interesting. We react to headlines, and headlines are the evidence of something that already happened. I think it's a better move to take the data and make educated forecasts, because if you're checking the weather and you go outside and you touch the ground and it's wet, that means it's already rained. That's kind of the headline, right? It already happened. Inflation rate has already happened. They're reporting things that we can no longer do anything about. But a forecast is what we anticipate is going to happen, and that gives us the opportunity to really plan, use the data that we have at hand to make the best decisions moving forward. So, there's always that one guy in the neighborhood who waits until the last minute to put his shutters up for the hurricane. And that's the guy that's not using the data. He's just waiting for the first tree to blow over in his front yard, and then he's going to race to Lowe's or Home Depot and try to fight somebody for that last sheet of plywood. So anyway, we're going to dive into all of your questions during the next segments of the show. We're going to cover all those topics and make sure you're not one of those people who are lighting themselves on fire and running naked down the street. So hang in there with us. We're going to be right back after this short break, and we'll dig into your questions. Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com, www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Here's another 5-star review.
My wife and I own a small business. And the way our accountant files our taxes, we don't show much income on tax returns. Because of this, it looks as if we don't make the money. This was a problem for our bank when we applied for a mortgage. But not for Mark. He verifies our income by using our monthly bank statements. Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team made a big difference for me. Yes, I am happy to recommend Mr. Mortgage Mark.
It's not every day that you need an appraisal, whether it's for a divorce settlement, estate planning, or maybe you're appealing a tax assessment, or you just want to make sure you have adequate coverage in your property insurance. When you need a certified appraisal, turn to my friends at SOFLappraisal.com. That's SOFLappraisal.com. Peter and his team have been appraising properties here in South Florida for decades. SOFLappraisal.com. And tell them you heard this on the Mr. Mortgage Show.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now, 561-291-8569.
All right, I am Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show, and you heard the announcer. You can get your questions to us on the Anytime Hotline at 561-291-8569. That's 561-291-8569. And that's truly anytime. When Dom and I are not in the studio doing the show, that pushes to my office. So someone will be happy to get you in touch with me if you have questions during the week. And actually got a call on a Wednesday night. It went to voicemail, but it was a Wednesday night at 10 o'clock. So somebody hit the Anytime Hotline while listening to the podcast, which was super cool. And you can find the replays of the show on all the podcast platforms. So you can just Google the Mr. Mortgage Show. You'll find us just about anywhere podcasts are served up. And obviously we're on the iHeart app and you can check us out there, but we are everywhere. And we just put together the new Facebook page, The Mr. Mortgage Show. And we're going to start dropping stats and a little bit of a deeper dive during the week of all of these subjects, because some of them really do merit a longer and deeper conversation than we're able to do on the air. So check out the Mr. Mortgage Show on Facebook, and you can just go up to the Facebook search bar and type in the Mr. Mortgage Show and we'll pop up. We're putting some pretty interesting data up there also. It's a good way to follow us and stay in touch during the week in between the show. So anyway, we're going to move right into the question segment. Wait a minute, I just saw somebody on fire naked running down the street. That must be somebody from the first segment who doesn't have this information yet. So hang in there. We're going to put all your worries at ease during the show this morning. So, hey, Dom, what do we have teed up for questions?
Alrighty, Jessie just called us with this one. She's asking, I've been renting my townhouse with my boyfriend. We're breaking up and I want to buy the place from our landlord. My question is, I was giving my boyfriend the rent and he paid it out of his account. Will this hurt my chances for the mortgage since technically he has the rent history?
Hey, Jesse, that's a great question. So, yeah, sorry or congratulations on the breakup. Not sure what's in order there, but not an uncommon situation. So first, let me congratulate you on trying to buy your place. I think it's super cool that you're trying to jump into ownership and build some equity, especially after renting. But to answer your question, it's not uncommon that that roommates, typically one roommate will pay the other, and that individual will pay the rent. And to answer your question, it will not hurt